former student activist and ANC underground operative joined state intelligence after 1994 as part of the cohort that would later be integrated into the National Intelligence Agency. NIA would then second him to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as an investigator into atrocities committed during apartheid.
As part of my task in the underground structures, we were tasked to look at those that had infiltrated our movement. And I was based in the underground structures of the Western Cape. And we had actually detected some of the individuals that worked with the apartheid apparatus at the time. And I think what helped when I was deployed to the TRC, I was able to validate evidence that we had collected prior year. I'd even been able to detect that one of the underground comrades that I was reporting to had actually been part of the apartheid apparatus.
In fact, that's exactly what I was going to ask, because presumably you would have known about those people as well, and this becomes relevant later on in life with a lot of things that happened in the intelligence community, but also in structures like your National Prosecuting Authority, where all manner of allegations were leveled at some of the people who were there. But we'll get into that a little later on. I want to fast forward then to your term. You served in the TRC for how many years?
For 18 months.
For about 18 months. And then what happened thereafter?
Then I returned to head office of the National Intelligence Agency.
To do what exactly?
To set up a national operational center. It was the first national operational center within the NIA at the time. And this had followed the Mabashibani massacre that took place in around 97 in KZN. And then the Deputy Minister Nklandla had requested that the agency set up a national operational center that was able to respond to situations of a security nature throughout the country.
This takes you to about what, the 2000s?
No, it took me to about, I was there for only 3 months when I was deployed to the Western Cape, to head the Western Cape's National Intelligence Agency in the Western Cape. And the task was very clear. At the time, there were challenges with regard to Pagat, or what we called urban terror. And I was requested to see how we are able to stabilize the province. You see, we similar to what I told the commission at the point. You see, it's difficult for us who had served within that capacity to really talk about our life within that spaces. So I'm going to be very circumspect in how I deal with these issues, because I wasn't sure that we were actually going to be dealing and delving a lot into the intelligence. But I was deployed to the Western Cape to deal with Pagat, taxi violence, and organized crime.
To think that, 27 years into democracy, we're still dealing with that phenomenon.
True.
Not only that, the gun running that has been going on in the escape, the drug money that's going around, messing those communities up, without, certainly from where we stand as ordinary South Africans, there doesn't seem to be, a plan to actually deal effectively with this phenomena.
I think there are plans, and I think there's a lot of work that has been done. But I think what has also happened successfully is that a number of these plans have been disrupted. And I think that is really a discussion for another day, because there has been significant disruption, especially within our security establishment over these 27 years. If I can Yeah, no, you see, I'm very cautious about how we speak about these spaces. I think what I can tell you was discovered as early as the late 90s was the presence of people who had in one way or another worked with the former establishment, who was part of orchestrating or maintaining disruptive behavior in society.
But then, I mean, as part of the cohort that came with the new government, was it not your responsibility to deal with those forces, to deal with those people, and make sure that intelligence serves the needs of the new democracy?
Correct. And we did. Yeah, if I can indicate, I was deployed to the Western Cape in April 1998. By May 1999, the first group of individuals that was involved in violence around the urban terror issue had been arrested. And I think if you go back and you look at urban terror in the Western Cape, as from 1999 to 2001, you'd see that there had been absolute stabilization. We also were able to characterize the problem for what it was.
Which was?
There was a sense at the time that we were dealing with extremism. And our characterization was that we had social problems within the areas. There was the issue of gangsterism and drugs. And if you just reflect on the TRC, you would remember that the apartheid security forces had been instrumental in feeding communities with drugs. I think if you just reflect on Peaches Gordon, he's one of the characters that was active within the field of gangsterism. So these characters are scattered throughout our society. Some of them no more, others are still there, still active.
Commissioner, I want us to go straight to 2004. You are appointed the Home Affairs DDG. You are responsible for immigration. Among the things you find there is the issue of the Lindela Repatriation Center. It's a big issue, and of course, you're going to understand why I'm asking this a little later on, because it then takes us to the Busasa issues which have been in the public domain. What did you find when you arrived at Home Affairs?
I must maybe indicate that I served under Barry Gilder as the then DG of Home Affairs. Okay. And I was appointed in the capacity of DDG National Immigration Branch. And because we were busy with the turnaround strategy for the department, my task was to develop this National Immigration Branch. And what I discovered there is that we had almost a non-existent branch. Little emphasis was placed on immigration and its impact on society. So I set up the National Immigration Branch. And in actual fact, the National Immigration Branch was launched by then President Thabo Mbeki in Cape Town sometime. We also then found that when we were dealing with illegal immigrants who were being deported, we had a facility called Lindela that I discovered then was outsourced to then Busasa. And I was then instructed by Minister Mapisa Ngakula to say that there are challenges at Lindela. There's lots of litigation taking place. We are having South Africans incarcerated for protracted periods. And so the liabilities to the department was increasing. I then went to look at this facility, and then I discovered anomalies. I discovered that the entire process outside admission into the facility was basically outsourced. I then immediately did a study and proposed that we need to segment the different services, because we were having complaints about safe custody, we were having complaints about food, and then also complaints of individuals being collected and incarcerated without Home Affairs being party to that.
I mean, I remember this. I mean, there were lots of conversations in Parliament and elsewhere about the goings on there. And then, as a little later, just before I get there, can you remember how much the value of the tender at the time?
I'll know what the new tender was. I can't recall the value of the tender. Maybe just to indicate, you see, what I discovered further was that Bosasa was contracting policemen and police reservists to moonlight for Bosasa from a Thursday to a Sunday. And what they would do is they would go out on the street and just randomly collect black African people that they thought were not South African, and especially if they weren't carrying a South African identity document on them. And that practice was the first practice I stopped at Lindela.
Would that be the reason then for your removal from Home Affairs a year later, or was it just coincidental?
No, I got suspended at Home Affairs. I got suspended for 2 months as I was busy with the process of streamlining the business of Home Affairs at Lindela.
Why were you suspended?
For not reporting the deaths of 3 inmates at Lindela. So I wasn't suspended for the deaths of the 3 inmates. I was suspended for not reporting the death of the 3. What was ironic about that was, by then my DG was Jeff Matatuka. You see, and at the time that these inmates had passed on, I was actually on special leave. And it may be interesting to know.
Did you not point that out to him?
I pointed it out in the first day. They still suspended me for 2 months.
And then what happened after that?
When I returned to Home Affairs, Lindela, Bosasa's contract was being processed, was in the final stages of being processed, and they secured a further contract of 1 billion rand over a period of 10 years. So the contract had been extended for 10 years. I can tell you, most probably till this day, Bosasa will be running the Lindela facility. I know they...
Did you ever ask what process was followed?
No, I went to look at it for you. They advertised, in the 2 months that I was suspended, they advertised the tender, they adjudicated on the tender, and they approved the tender for Bosasa.
Now, looking at what has come out of the state capture inquiry around Bosasa, were you then surprised?
I wasn't at all. In actual fact, I get cited by one of Bosasa's managers for disrupting their business. And I was surprised that the commission didn't feel it fit to call me and ask me to provide context to what had happened then. I must tell you also, I even met with the investigators.
And what did they tell you?
No, I shared information with the investigators. I shared information on Home Affairs with the Commission's investigators. To date, they had not returned to get an affidavit from me on that matter.
Did they ever give you an explanation?
Never.
Have you asked since, because the Commission?
I have requested to appear before the Commission.
But wasn't that important? Because, I mean, it's not just the Bosasa issue. I mean, several other people have actually leveled allegations against you. The Mufamadi panel appeared before, Mufamadi himself appeared before the Commission and said things that were actually very, made very serious, serious allegations were actually made against you.
Very, very serious allegations.
Did you not feel there was a need to actually clear your name?
The most serious allegation was made against me at the Commission. I was accused of treason. So surely, of all the witnesses that were called, surely Arthur Fraser should have been afforded the right to provide his side of the story. And Arthur Fraser, I can tell you, after Jeff Matkatuka appeared before the Commission on the 10th of July 2020, I had sat for 4 days at the Commission's doors requesting an audience with the chair and insisting that I be afforded the opportunity to clear my name. I am still waiting for a response from the Commission.
Mind you, some of these allegations, it wasn't the first time that some of these allegations were actually made. They had been made to the panel.
Correct.
Did you challenge the version that some people put to the panel before?
Before we get to the panel, in 2014, Jacques Paul writes about a report that had been prepared by the national or by a state security agency. So the powers that be there at the time shares a report that they developed, having investigated me for what? It must have been 5 years. They shared it with Jacques Paul. And Jacques Paul was still a journalist at the City Press and was frolicking with all his friends in other departments. And he wrote an article to make the first allegations of my malfeasance or my corruptive behavior. He ultimately wrote the book with the very same information he had. So there's a book by Jacques Paul, and maybe it would be interesting to tell you this, which I told the high-level review panel. In that investigation of the State Security Agency, I was not once afforded an opportunity of responding to any claim. In actual fact, I wasn't even told what they were investigating.
But did you not raise this with them? Did you not raise this with your boss or bosses?
I raised it with the high-level review panel. Maybe if I go back to 2009, because maybe that's an interesting chapter in our history. If you reflect on 2009, it is when, soon after, President Zuma was appointed. There were 3 officials appointed to lead intelligence in South Africa: Jeff Matkatuka, Mo Sheikh, and Gibson Njanje. They formed State Security Agency. But as soon as they came in, I was perceived or projected to be an Mbeki-ite.
Is this when you were suspended?
Before my suspension, in 2009. In actual fact, on the second week of their tenure, my powers were withdrawn as a DDG operations. And staff were told that I'm Mbeki-ite and we're going to be dealt with. In actual fact, it would have been nice to cross-examine some of them, because some of them refer to us as cockroaches. So they said we need to deal with these cockroaches, which were Mbekiites at the time. Now, to tell you, I don't know. I know President Mbeki was the president, but I never interfaced with President Mbeki. And maybe when we come to President Zuma, let us talk about...
Because, how do you move from being Mbekiite to now being this person who will, do anything for Jacob Zuma, whatever the cost to you and the country?
Maybe if I reflect just on, because I thought about that this morning, I've only served for 505 days under President Zuma. I don't know if you know that. Mm-hmm. Under President Ramaphosa, I've now served for almost 1,500 days. So that just gives you a sense. Then I know there's been the claim, and this is what I responded to the high-level review panel, that I leaked what they called the spy tapes.
So-called spy tapes.
So-called spy tapes.
Did you not leak the spy tapes?
Well, I believe I'm a patriot. I serve the Constitution. So that's my first point of departure. On the issue of the spy tapes, did we investigate the Browsmore? Yes. Did I lead the investigation on the Browsmore? Yes. Who instructed us to investigate the Browsmore? President Mbeki. Who was my minister at the time? Ronnie Casserols. So that is when we did the Browsmore. So there were interceptions.
So, was there nothing wrong in leaking the...
No, it's unethical. It's unethical and unlawful. You see, there was an investigation by the Inspector General of Intelligence that looked into this matter. And they made findings. What I know is that I've been cleared of that findings. What I also know is that there were other agencies that had access to similar tapes, but I can assure you, that the tapes of the National Intelligence Agency has never been shared.
Who would have been in a position to then share those?
I think it would be useful for you to ask the Inspector General's office, because they would have a clear indication, of who had access to that and why I am confident that it wasn't our tapes that leaked.
But see, this becomes important. Part of, us, the reason we're doing this interview is because we've never heard, your side of the story, and there is information that is out there in the public domain, which is quite damaging. For example, on the basis of what you allegedly did, by giving former President Jacob Zuma the spy tapes. It's the basis on which everyone then believes the theory that the reason former President Jacob Zuma has gotten out on parole now is because you have come through for him once again, just as you did back then when he was desperate in the fight with the NPA. So it is important, I think, for your own sake, if what is out there in the public domain simply isn't true, it's for you to set the record straight.
No, I can assure you that the tapes were never leaked from the National Intelligence Agency. I'm not even referring to myself here, because we were a small team that worked on this matter. And that's why I'm referring to the fact that there was an Inspector General report. I think both Jacques Poe talks about Moshe meeting with me, and I think Moshe talks about it in the commission. So it's there for public knowledge. Moshe did reach out to me.
What did you want?
Moshe reached out to me and indicated that NPA want to interface with you.
Why? What did he want?
Maybe, let me come back to that for you. I'm just going to say, so he indicated that NPA wanted to interface with me. And I said, but why would you as a civilian, Mo, want to facilitate a meeting between government departments? So he said, no, Arthur, you know, these people are saying you're too powerful. They're scared to come to you. So I said, so who are these people? You say, I don't want to go to the name, but if I was before the commission, I was going to disclose the name. That individual know who he is. So I said, Mo, you unfortunately cannot facilitate that meeting. What you can tell the person is call me. If there's a legal obligation for me to interface with NPA, I will do that. So, that for me would most probably be the clearest evidence that Jacob Zuma's lawyers or his cronies had not received tapes from me. And you know what the NPA was looking for? They wanted to know if we had similar tapes to the tapes that Hali had. And I then had to direct them to say, please show us what Hali's got and be very specific, and I will verify if we've got that. Now the NPA couldn't come to us to verify if we gave the tapes.
Why do you think that was?
No, they needed authentic, legitimate recordings. And that's what we provided the NPA.
Now, you do realize that the whole spy tape saga was one of the defining moments, well, in so many ways, of your life in the public, in the public service.
No, you see, there's characters, both in the media and otherwise, that are there to cast aspersions, to divert people, to divert the public's mindset, and to then find victims. So that was it. I think what nobody says is that a few weeks after Sam Soldem wrote the article about me leaking to Hali, they corrected the article, but a one-liner to say that we now know that it's not NIA, it's crime intelligence that leaked it. But nobody, because that's not a convenient narrative. So nobody had taken that narrative forward, because the very originators of the narrative had recalled or corrected what they had presented out there. So that stigma, unfortunately, stayed with me. You see, what's important for me is that I know my truth. Whatever people say, but the only way I could survive as an individual, as a public servant, is by knowing my own truth. And that's what I can tell you. I know my truth.
When the State Capture Commission didn't give you an opportunity to either, have your say or get an opportunity to cross-examine the people who leveled allegations against you, you then went and laid charges against several people, including the then acting Director General of Intelligence, Loyiso Jafta, Sidney Mufamadi, who chaired the inquiry into the intelligence agency. What has come of that?
Maybe, William, I must just correct you. I don't know if the State Capture Commission is done with its work. I know that it's supposed to finish its business at the end of September, so I might still be called. So I'm still holding out for the request to come and present evidence. So I don't want to say that it's done. The commission is confronted with two applications from me. One was an application to cross-examine those that had made allegations against me. Now, I have not yet received a response on that request. So I'm hoping that the Commission is going to be able to give me a response to my request to cross-examine.
So you're still hopeful?
I'm still hopeful until after the end of September. But with regard to the laying of criminal cases, you see, there were some sensational revelations made during the last week of January, where Dr. Mafumadi, Loyiso Jafta, the then acting Director General, Mr. Y and Ms. K presented evidence to the Commission of gross maladministration and corruption against me, Arthur Fraser.
Which you deny. You deny everything
I deny,
that they put before the Commission.
But more so, I was so perturbed by the boldness to actually lie under oath, not just to the nation but to the globe. I then took it upon myself that on the 31st of January, I laid criminal charges against Dr. Mafumadi, Loyiso Jafta, and the two other colleagues. And you know what is peculiar? I also registered subordination of perjury charges against the evidence leader, Advocate Pretorius, because I felt that he had a duty of care to ensure that what he tables assists the chairperson to arrive at the truth. So Advocate Pretorius has also been criminally charged. But I've actually gone further. I've also registered a complaint with the Legal Practice Council, and they're busy processing my complaints. But what I can tell you is that the NPA has not touched my complaint. So since the 31st of January to date, it's maybe because it's Arthur Fraser, that the matter of criminality had not been considered.
Well, hopefully you'll get that opportunity, and I'm sure the nation will be looking forward to that if and when it happens. But as far as you're concerned, you did your job the way it should be done. You didn't do any bidding for Jacob Zuma. You didn't get involved in ANC affairs that had nothing or very little to do with the state and the future of our nation.
I pride myself on being a professional and a patriot. I think that is something that I think is sacrosanct. And any person that lead any institution in government, if we do not live up to that, then we don't deserve to lead. Now, I think maybe and you know, as people presented before the Commission, let's talk about that. They all presented as if Arthur Fraser had been there for what is called the 9 wasted years, when Arthur was only there for 1 year, 4 months. That's the sum total, 19 months I was there. So it's slightly more than, but under Jacob Zuma's leadership, 1 year, 4 months.
Now, if you look at what has come out of the inquiry on the Guptas, for example, right? Gibson, Ambassador Makletuka and others speak about the inappropriate relationship they believed Jacob Zuma had with the Guptas, and how they flagged that and how that was detrimental to the country. In the time, do you agree with them? Maybe that's where I should start.
Maybe I must just remind you, I wasn't in the state security agent at
But
the time.
knowing what you know now, were they correct?
You see, I don't want to delve into the detail because I haven't watched the commission throughout. I only had the need to watch it when issues were raised about Arthur Fraser. I'm still running a department, so I haven't watched. So I can't tell you. I can't evaluate if so.
But from what you know about the kind of relationship Jacob Zuma had with the Guptas, do you believe, as a South African citizen, that it was appropriate and that it didn't have any detrimental effect in our country? Just as a personal.
From a personal perspective, I can say I may have had concerns by the conduct of the Guptas. That I'm prepared to say. About evaluating the relationships, I don't have evidence around that for you. So I don't want to, and this shouldn't be seen as if I'm trying to protect. I like to deal with fact. And if I don't have fact, I don't want to cast aspersion.
If you cast your mind back, for example, 2017, months before that ANC conference that elected Cyril Ramaphosa as ANC president and then subsequently him becoming president. You remember the betrayal of the promise document by these academics who spoke about corruption and state capture, who spoke about the repurposing of state institutions, symbiotic relationship between the constitutional state and the shadow state. And this is what opened a lot of people's eyes, and that's when then, you know, there were concerted efforts from a number of quarters across the country, people who started now looking at this phenomenon and what it possibly meant for the country. Just to take us through your thoughts, how did you see all of that, the emergence, you know, of that report, and what, of course, it set in motion subsequently? Just your take.
You see, the report itself is an interesting report. And if you look at the pool of academics that had developed the report and how the report was constructed and how it played itself out, it's something that's interesting and should actually be more deeply interrogated. You would even see that within the commission, the evidence leader almost verbatim reflects on what the report presents. But I think in essence, there was a problem within the state. I think there were challenges. There were challenges in how people manipulated processes. So I accept that there were problems there.
But do you think that the report exaggerated those problems, or twisted them?
I think
you have reservations. This is the point I'm making.
I have reservations about the report.
What kind of reservations?
Well, the report ignores the fact that we live in a constitutional democracy. So it constructs narratives that's not framed within our democracy.
But you don't think some of the facts in the report were born by loads of other evidence, from emails to what people said at the State Capture Commission, and so even if they have missed things here or there, but largely the report was accurate.
Largely it was, yeah, I can acknowledge that.
So you don't have issues with that. But do you not think then it also perhaps points to intelligence failures, because intelligence had or has the, constitutional duty or mandate to actually look at the sort of things that the report spoke to?
Look, we can say that there may have been a lapse in intelligence. But I think the challenge that we have, especially in intelligence, but I think it's something that happens in government at large, is the fluidity of the leadership in those services. If you just think in those 9 years, we've had, what, 3, maybe 5 DGs appointed, and a number of senior managers appointed. So there's no continuity. And the reality is that you need continuity in leadership to ensure that you're able to disrupt projects that may be underway.
Do you think that was the problem? The fact that we've had, something like 7 ministers since 1994?
Correct.
And about 10 or so, or no less than 10?
No less than 10.
DGs. Do you think that was the problem?
I think,
or that is the problem with our intelligence?
Not just intelligence, throughout government, is the fact that there's no continuity. And I think also when we have a change in administration, we act as if it is different parties that are actually governing the institution.
You know, I want to end this part of our conversation with a quote from the president on the day he was concluding his testimony at the state capture inquiry. He said, and I quote, "The establishment of a commission was a crossroads for us. I hold the belief that if we did not establish a commission, we would have continued to waddle in a situation where corruption continued unabated in the dark." Do you agree with him on that?
That's the
notwithstanding the relations you have, or the fact that you still haven't had an opportunity to cross-examine people who leveled allegations against you or say your side of the story. But just watching, or from what you have watched, would you agree with that sentiment?
I can agree with it in part for you. I think if we get our intelligence agency to perform the function that they should perform, and that is to be the risk management agency of the state, then we will get closer to getting rid of corruption within government and even society. And that's why I'd want to agree with you, this fluidity of heads of intelligence is a problem. We need to allow people to serve their tenure and to be held accountable for lapses that occur. I think we mustn't find scapegoats.
You're leaving correctional services in a couple of weeks' time.
2 weeks.
When you reflect, what do you think you managed to do?
The number of things that I had done with my leadership at correctional services. And while I was concerned, because I came here in a very peculiar way, I actually mentioned to the officials when I came here, I say, I am like your stepfather that you never knew your mother had. So there was a relationship all along, and then suddenly one day you discovered that this is your stepfather.
Interesting you go there. I actually want to go there. What did the president say to you, when he decided he was taking you out of intelligence to come and head correctional services?
I didn't have engagement with the president.
Who came to you and delivered the news?
The then minister, Letsatsi Duba.
Did she tell you what the president had told her?
Well, she had indicated this thing happened. My transfer to correctional services took place over a period of 4 days, where I think you'd recall that I had withdrawn the security clearance of the Inspector General, Dr. Dintwe. And there was hype. Jacques Pauw's book was still making lots of noise. And she had then told me that there was a decision that I need to be transferred for a short period so that they could clarify the challenges that they saw, the withdrawal of the clearance and the allegation by the Inspector General that I was preventing him investigating me around the PAN, the Principal Agent Network. So I thought I was coming here for 3 months. I think my colleagues also thought.
The rest is history. But do you think, well, looking back or reflecting on that episode, do you think the president sacrificed you and took sides with the Inspector General, effectively throwing you under the bus?
I was thrown under the bus. I'm not going to talk about sides. I think there's enough public documentation around. There's affidavits in court. There's enough public information for people to make an opinion what happened then. But you must know the president has the prerogative to redeploy heads of department.
But why would he throw you under the bus?
No, I just think that I was inconvenient at SSA.
Why?
Because of the noise that was around here.
Do you think the Jacob Zuma factor had everything to do with it? The fact that everyone saw you as this Jacob Zuma person who would do anything and everything to save him or support him?
That would be peculiar for you, because of all the people that served under Jacob Zuma, I'm sure I'm the one that served the least time under him. So that would be peculiar. I know the noise, the perception were created that I was a Jacob Zuma person. The only thing I know is that I was appointed by him into the position of Director General SSA. And in actual fact, if you think about it, Vuya, I was the first public servant to be purged under Jacob Zuma's administration. Do you know that?
You said that earlier.
Yeah, so I was the first to be purged.
So the theory is that you're coming through for him now in a time of need, and that's why he's now on parole.
No, with regard to, let's take Jacob Zuma aside. With regard to any person that has to take parole, there's procedures, there's law.
So what process was followed this time around?
He was placed on medical parole. He came into our facility. We have a responsibility to provide security and care. And as in all instances, when we admit a person into our facility, we make sure that we do a full assessment, including a health assessment.
Okay, so who did the assessment?
Our medical staff,
okay,
and our administrative staff,
yeah,
in the center.
And who was part of the process that then, on the back of that assessment, took the decisions that eventually led to him being paroled?
No, maybe I must talk about the process. You see, when you do the assessments, you'll then know what type of care must be given. So when we deal with care, we deal with even your dietary requirements. So every offender that is incarcerated at this department will have to be able to give a history of themselves, both health and otherwise. And then we assess how do we categorize them and where we are able to place them. This was in the same process. The same process applied. I think what I know happened after that at the onset, he declared his comorbidities. But additional to that, because he was still under the care of the South African Military Health Services, they had also provided us an assessment on his first day of admission. So that is when we realized that we've got a person in our custody who actually is frail. So I think that's maybe the first point. We had then received further reports, medical reports, that indicated that he requires specialized treatment. And it was only around the third report that we received where his medical team, the medical team in conjunction with our team, indicated that he can no longer be kept in our facility because the type of care, medical care required, we are not able to provide. And this assessment is made with every other offender that we have in our facilities. Our doctors, our nurses will write referrals to the head of center and say, we've got the situation, please transfer.
But whatever was his condition, it's allowable in terms of your rules.
It has to be done. When we are directed by health professionals, we are obligated. It has to be done.
Who has the final say? Is it you, just you, or you together with the parole board?
No, we're talking now about parole. I'm still talking about, maybe I'm talking about him going to hospital.
Okay.
Because you'd recall that he had gone to hospital. And that was because we were advised that the type of care needed and the type of clinical what procedures that needed to be done couldn't be done in our facility. So we then had to move him to a tertiary institution, medical care, healthcare institution. And it's there that we got further reports, where we then got informed that there's a range of procedures that need to happen and all of that. There was then, from the medical staff, there was an application made much earlier. I don't have the details with me now for you, where they requested, where they applied for medical parole. And I think that's at the beginning of August where they applied. And we directed to the relevant structures.
Which was?
Within our structure, we've got healthcare, and then we've got the medical advisory parole board. So we directed it to them.
And what did they say?
They allocated a doctor to go and do an observation, as they do in all instances. They had done an observation, and based on the engagement and assessment, the doctor's engagement and assessment on the patient, recommendations were made to the medical parole board, advisory board. And those recommendations were made, yes. And the recommendations were that the board did not approve for medical parole because they indicated that he was in a stable condition. What I need to indicate, when the medical advisory board provided those recommendations, I had then, the head of the center, who has the authority to decide, then reviewed the information available and then indicated that the conditions, based on all the reports that we have, require us to release the former president. I then rescinded those delegations because it's original delegations that's with me that I had delegated to. I rescinded that, and I took the decision then to place him on medical parole, and I'd given a host of reasons. The reasons is available, it's in documentation, and it will be presented to whoever need to see that. I'm sure Parliament will be asking to have
confident it will stand whatever scrutiny.
It's legal and procedural.